as we begin using the pen tool on projects, you're most likely going to start out by tracing an image you find on the internet, image you've taken with your phone, something you've drawn, scanned in, line art like we're going to do in this example. But you want to bring it into Illustrator and set it as a template file and lock it. So let me show you how to do that. So let's say we're doing the spooky Halloween scene. You'd come under Art and Illustration, and you'd want to change your width 2 inches, and I believe it said to do it landscape 22 by 17, and I click create. Alright, and this gives me my artboard. I'm going to hit Command 0 just to center it in my screen. Now I need something to trace, right, to start my Halloween spooky challenge here. So I'm going to switch over to Safari, and if I search in and I do Halloween coloring book, and I go to images, for example, and let's say I wanted to grab this guy. Alright, so I'd click on him, I would view image. That's really key. You want to click view image so you get the full size of whatever image it is, and if you don't, the thumbnail's smaller, not as high resolution. This still isn't super high, but it's the biggest possible image. Now from here, what you can do is you can either save it, you can right click and you can save image as, and that's probably a good idea. Save it to your project folder, right? So like if you should have a project folder for every project. You can call this one Halloween or whatever you want, but you can right click and save the image. You can also drag and drop right onto the Illustrator icon like that. It brings it into its own tab this way, right? Here's our document over here, and then this picture's in a tab. You can also do it to where, let's say you wanted it directly into what you're working on. If I open up that new document we had and I position my browser window slightly offset, and I can drag it right on top like that, and then line it up to where you might want to go. Now here's a crucial step. Over here we have layers, and let me shrink that a little bit so we can see. Alright, so I have layer 1. We don't ever want to move this layer, right? You're tracing this layer, so we got to set it up in a way that as you're working later, you're not drawing on it, and you don't accidentally move it halfway through the trace, because then it's harder to line up again. So this is what I like to do. I bring it in, I have layer 1, I double click, not on the letters, but over in the empty space, and I double click over there. I'm going to call it reference because it's a reference photo for what we're tracing. So it's my reference, and I want to click template and maybe bring it down to, you can start with 50, sometimes I do 30, but what that does, grays it out a little bit, right? Just kind of like you have tracing paper over something when you're a little kid. And you notice it automatically locks it because it's now a template layer or a reference photo layer, which is what we want, right? We can't move it, we can't grab it, we can't draw on it, nothing. Because we're going to trace it, you don't want to trace halfway through and then actually accidentally move it over and you can't get it right. So we have a reference, and then we'll do a new layer, and then I like to do things on their own layer, so I can call him Frank for Frankenstein, right? And then I would take my pen tool and have no fill. All right, I want a stroke. You can pick any color. By default, it's usually black. Sometimes I like to do other colors just to pen tool so they stand out better. But nevertheless, you can then come along and you start to pen tool your character, right? Something like this. Now remember, I have no fill, stroke only, because a fill will start to cover things up. And you can, let me just click off, and I can turn the visibility off, and you can start to see my pen tool, right? But I keep that locked, keep it as a reference photo, draw on another layer. So that should help to get you started. Use your layers, work on them, work smart, lock things when you're done, start new layers for new parts of your image.